Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. The South African government hosted a bidders conference for potential renewable energy investors this week. The country wants to procure nearly 3,800 megawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2016. Terence Creamer attended the event and joins me to discuss how it went. Terence, welcome to Second Take. There was a strong response to the tender when it was released in early August. Was this reflected in the event?
I think it was. Since the release of the documentation on the 3rd of August, there have been about 500 downloads of the tender documentation, the request for proposals, and of those a good 300 are potential actual renewable energy developers, others being financiers, bankers, and people that want to supply equipment into these projects. But there were about, I'd say, 1,000 people that converged on Gallagher Estate during this week to hear a little bit more about the bidding documentation and to have some of their questions answered by the government who have put out the tender, the Department of Energy and the National Treasury, as well as the transaction advisors, which are legal people as well as technical financial people that have helped really draft and craft the tender documentation into what it is. So there were a lot of people, there was a lot of interest, and this interest wasn't confined to South Africa. There were representatives from Europe, from Spain, Portugal, from Germany, and from other parts of Europe, as well as Asia and North America. So I think the interest remains strong, and this is good in the sense that there was that uncertain period between December and August this year where we weren't sure how the tender would be structured. We knew that government had decided to abandon the renewable energy feed-in tariffs in favour of a competitive bidding process. This led to a period of unsettled period and a confusing period where there was a fear that the investor appetite would diminish. But it looks like there's still intense interest in this program because the program, although it's modest in world terms in terms of capacity that's going to be deployed on the ground, other countries have deployed a lot more renewable capacity, often using feed-in tariffs. But in terms of a single procurement program, it's a fairly big ticket item, and it's really captured the imagination of investors.
What picture is emerging about the process?
Well, I think that was a very good part of this bidders conference that took place at Gallagher Estate, that people were able to get sort of a first-hand feel from the people that drafted the documentation that really have in-depth knowledge of the process, about what their thinking is about how this should unfold. And the process is going to be very pristine. I think that was very clear. The take-home message was, if you're not ready by the 4th of November to bid with your project, don't even submit. I think that was the strong message. You need to have a lot of the conditions precedent in place. You need your environmental record of decision. You need your land use license or your authorization. You need your water authorization if those are necessary, or some sort of letter of commitment. You need to have your financials in place, your structure in terms of your bidding consortium in place. It all has to be there and ready. You have to have your economic development, which relates to localization, community development, black economic empowerment. That all those boxes need to be ticked. Not just ticked, but they have to be substantially qualified. Otherwise, you are going to be disqualified. I think they don't want half-baked bids, and therefore it will also emerge. If you're not ready, there will be other windows. So the 4th of November is the first window, and they're hoping that it will be fully subscribed. The wind, the solar, the concentrating solar, the PV, the landfill gas, the biogas, the biomass projects. They're hoping for full subscription in the first round. They hope they won't need to open further windows, but they realize that the conditions are fairly onerous and they're fairly strict. And therefore they've said to bidders, if you're not ready by the 4th of November with all those things, there will be probably other windows that will open. So the next window will probably be sometime in March next year, where bidders will have a few more months, to get everything, all their ducks in a row before they come through. But the take-home message is, if you're not ready, don't bid. You will be disqualified, and it's going to be a waste of your time and energy And it could also prejudice you because you've already paid 15,000 rand for your bid documentation, which I suppose is fairly small fry, but you have to put down bid bonds of 100,000 rand per every megawatt bid. And you can actually lose those. The other thing is the process is pristine. A lot of emphasis was given to doing this in a competitive way. So there can't be collusion in the way you prepare your projects. There also the issue of corruption came up front and centre, and we know that there is a problem in South Africa in terms of public sector procurement processes having been tainted in the past by corruption. And I think this tender is trying to be as pristine as possible. In fact, the documentation looks world class, and the way the process is being managed really is a credit not only to government but to the transaction advisors.
Concerns have been raised about the tender's high barriers to entry, but government has now indicated that it is working to simplify the process for smaller bidders. Can you tell us more?
Yes, I think this was also a key message of the bidders' conference. I think there's a realization that this is a serious bid, the big tender, and it's a serious process, and the conditions for a small company or a small entrepreneur are going to be onerous. And, I think there's been a lot of unhappiness out there about having to pay 15,000 rand for your bid documentation, etc. And why are you excluding, the small guy? And I think government realizes this. They're wanting to put renewable energy onto a firm footing in South Africa. Therefore, the tender has been created with high barriers to entry. They're trying to attract the best and the brightest in the world of renewables. And that's why, and they realise that by creating those higher barriers to entry, you're more likely to attract that sort of calibre of investor. So they've done it on purpose, but they also realise that, look, we don't want this to be only about the rich and powerful in the renewable energy space. We want to open this to entrepreneurs and smaller energy independent power producers eventually. And you can bid as a small investor for projects of between 1 and 5 megawatts, which are fairly small, in this IPP round. But they are saying there is space to wait, and that a new tender document is being prepared and will be released, which is much more simplified. Has lower barriers to entry. Well, we haven't seen it, but it should have lower barriers to entry, but will still be fairly competitive and pristine. And that documentation should come out before the end of the year. Probably we're going to see with this, what the government is hoping is they're going to receive a whole lot of bids on the 4th of November. And then by COP17, which starts on the 28th of November, they would like to announce some of the preferred bidders. It will be very interesting if they can, because it will be a showcase event. And they'll also then be able to align that showcase event with these showcase projects. But at around that time, they think that this tender for small bidders will come out. In the meantime, there's also a second small project process that's already underway, which has lower barriers to entry, and that is the COP17 Showcase Renewable Energy Projects, which is 20 megawatts. And they're looking to procure that by the 15th of, these projects have to be ready, up and running by the 15th of November. So a very short lead time, and they have lowered, the criteria for them. They're going to give a 2-year PPA, which a power purchase agreement, which Eskom will sign. So there are a few entry points for smaller investors that are where the entry barriers aren't as high. But government is aware that the big tender, the criteria is very stringent, and therefore we should hopefully see a different set of documents emerging for the smaller entrepreneur.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.